Hi, welcome to the Parenting Bridge podcast. I'm Dr. Michelle Alden, a licensed professional counselor, parent coach, and family therapist, and I'm here to help you to build a bridge to your best family possible. Tonight, I wanted to talk to you about some of the destruction and the impulsive aggression that we're seeing in so many of the kids. And I know that you guys are struggling with it and seeing it too. And I know that it's been a struggle for a long time. And we have always addressed this with the need, we know that you need safety and that we want to establish safety. And so I just want to talk about this tonight and just put some ideas out there. So one thing that I think is important to realize is that this is really impulsive behavior and that it comes from a delay in executive functioning skills. It's a brain issue. It's neurological. It's not just defiance or disobedience when you have kind of that really impulsive, destructive anger. It's just coming from a different place. And that doesn't mean that we're going to just excuse it. I want to really deal with it and talk about it, but I think it's important to understand that this impulsive delay in executive functioning skills is driving a lot of this. And so we have to really look at how we handle it in light of that. This is how I understand it. The reactive center of the brain is responding to stimuli and taking charge of all the decision making. So the decision making isn't happening from the place of executive functioning. They're not thinking about, if I do this, this is what's going to happen. They're not really great at cause and effect and really understanding that or holding that very well. So, in their minds, like, if this happens, then this happens. That's part of what we're teaching, and that's part of what we have to keep working on teaching our kids. But their central part of their reactive center of their brain. So they have the emotions and the reactive. Those are what is responding to the stimuli and is taking charge in the decision making. And that's what's causing a lot of the impulsiveness. So focusing, we don't want to spend time focusing on how you feel about it, how it made you feel, if they care, that kind of stuff, because we were going to really focus on what we're going to do about it and be more action orientated. And I think one of the hardest things about the destruction and the things that I see happening is that it's infuriating, right? It's your home, they're punching holes in the walls, they're breaking things, it's crazy making because you're living with that and they don't seem to really care, right? And sometimes it's not their stuff that's getting broken, although some kids, it's just whatever is there. But for a lot of you, it's your home. And then if there's the violence towards the other kids, like there's, or yourself, you're really probably struggling with that. And so we have to really use these tools rather than just be disgusted or disdain. So I see a lot of that, especially, when there's been a lot of destruction. It's just like, it's hard to not just really feel a lot of disdain for what's happening. The aggression piece of it is more of the anger, the spiteful, vengeful, defiant piece of it. And so that's what it rises up in us too when those things are happening. It's hurtful. There can be shock at the stuff that's happened. I've worked with kids that have smashed windshields of cars, done an incredible amount of damage. And so there's also that resentment piece of it. And so this is the thing is this is how these kids are coping, and I see it across the board. Even the kids that aren't as aggressive, like willing to like really do something like put holes in the wall and stuff. It's more like they'll grab something and just break it in the moment. It's still part of their coping skills. And it's terrible. Like, these are not the coping skills that we want them to have. And it's not that you necessarily taught them those coping skills. I'm not saying for a minute that you taught them these coping skills, but it is very difficult because they have these terrible coping skills and it's like producing this physical release, and you're dealing with the aftermath of it. And so I think that's a lot of the question too. It's like, we want the kids to pay, right? Like we want them to pay for this stuff that they've done somehow. We want to do something to pay. So we want to talk about that a little bit too. One thing that I've been talking to Dr. Federici about, my colleague on the East Coast. He's a neuropsych doctor. Some of you know him or know of him or have had your kids evaluated by him. And we were talking about just this high level of aggression, and just this like out of control, like in a minute, right? Like it's like they can't manage their emotions. So it's like this intermittent explosive disorder kind of stuff, or dysregulated mood disorder. You're just like 1 minute, it's like manic, right? Like 1 minute they can be laughing and like, almost in a crazy, like frenzied state. And then the next second it's like they're angry, they're crying or stomping around or hitting things or, slamming doors, breaking windows, things like that. And so it happens really, really fast. So he was talking about the medication. And so I would like to encourage you to have conversations with your med managers about this. Like if you're seeing these really big jumps in moods, and I'm not just talking about like in the morning they were kind of, one way, and then in the afternoon they were other. I'm talking about like one kid that we'll be playing a game he wants to play. And as soon as something doesn't go his way, it's like he's just super upset. It doesn't matter that he's been doing things all along to other people. It's like there's no like reason in it, and so we're helping him through those moods. But when you're seeing those moods just flash so fast, like we gotta really go back and look at the medication. And so one of the things Dr. Federici said is that, really look at the medication they've been on for a long time, because it's not working if it's not stabilizing their mood. And sometimes that might have to do with their ADHD medication. He was talking about using Lamictal for mood, and Wellbutrin, but you're really going to have to talk to your doctors and really try to help them understand. And if you've talked to Dr. Federici, had an evaluation, and you're still having some of these problems, like you could for sure reach out to him. He can make recommendations, but he can't prescribe this medication to you. But you're going to have to do just talk to your doctors about it, because it's that extreme behavior that we want the medication to take the edge off of. And so we need something that's going to stabilize their moods. And it's going to have to be kind of fast working. So I'm not a med manager, and I wish I could tell you more, but I can't. So, the one thing he said is that if you have these kids that have these neurological things going on in their brain, where their reactive part of their brain is lit up, whether it's from, fetal alcohol, drug effect, trauma, whatever the things are, that the ADHD medication that's working primarily on the frontal lobe may be actually causing some problems. And then the autism piece of it is really interesting too, because these are primarily kids that have been diagnosed even with mild autism, but autism should not necessarily make kids violent and aggressive in the same way. Like they might have a temper tantrum, but this is something else going on. So one thing that we've been really working on with the group of kids that we have right now that are extremely, I call them edgy, they're going to change in a minute, is we're doing a lot of like transition work. So before we go from one thing to the next, we make sure that they're calm. If they start getting too wild, we sit down for a minute, take a break, and then go into it. And I'll sometimes asking a child to sit down or take a break can send them over the edge too. So I want you to be really careful about that. But just pay attention to kind of what's going on with them. And really, one thing that I think that helps the most is really, we have to really help develop their thinking and their planning and their responses, but we can't do it in the moment. And so that's the hardest part, right? It's like in the moment is when everything is happening, And that's a moment too late for us. So then we have to do whatever we can to just create safety. But on these other times, like what we want to do is to continue to develop thinking and planning responses. This is really, really important. I'm going to talk some more about that. But I think also, like, I just want to encourage you as parents, because I've been in a lot of homes where it's like there's been so much destruction for so long that I feel like it's, as the kids are getting bigger, it's like you're starting to realize, like, wow, like somebody's going to really get hurt. And the things that are getting damaged is getting more. But it's something to take very seriously. Like I'm taking it very seriously, the level that these kids are at in this physical release and what they're going to do that, and how important it is. When we say that we're going to do the program and we're going to take these especially the first 30 days and be really, really intensive, like you've got to do that. And if you have to reset and do that over and over until this part of safety is so important. Not just your safety, I mean, that's important too, and the other kids and your things, but for them, for these kids to know that we can't really move forward until we've dealt with that. We have to know as human beings how to get a hold of ourselves, because the problems are just going to get bigger. I mean, we're already calling the police, and but the whole thing about juvenile detention is that the goal is to do everything we can to change the behavior and to help these kids so that they don't end up being adult offenders. And these kids that have this stuff going on in their brains, like it's not planned out. I don't want them to go to, to adult jail. I want them to learn as kids, like we have to manage this. So, we take it really seriously and really think seriously about what you can do to help develop those thinking and planning responses. These kids it's not going to work to just tell them that they're going to breathe or tell them to use their coping skills. Like they may need a lot of hand over hand, like, here's what we're going to do. We're going to get calm. We're going to take a breath together, but also like planning out what they can do when they're angry, instead of just saying, I don't want you to get angry anymore, or I don't want you to break things, or I don't want you to do this. It's like, what are these kids going to do? Because that energy and that need to release that energy it's like they turn kind of into, wild animals. So we got to figure out how to best, reach these kids and do that. So sometimes the destructive nature of kids, especially as they get older, in that posturing, especially, and I see this especially with boys. Girls are a little bit more emotionally based, and sometimes they can even tell you, like, I'm so angry, like I'm going to break something, or I just want to punch something or somebody. Where boys will, when they start to feel overwhelmed, it's like it gives them so much power to be angry and to be destructive. And it's like intimidation. Whatever else they're feeling, like that's being held off because of this control and power that they have in that moment. And sometimes, and unfortunately, like you as the parents are kind of that outlet for venting that. That's the piece of it. Like we've got to do a lot of work to create something different. So here's some things that I've been thinking about. And I know that a lot of you that have done the program are doing these things or have done these things. If you are not doing the program now and you did the program in the past and you're seeing a rise in the aggression and all of that, first of all, I don't know if it's like there's Christmas and New Year's and then the weather changes. I think it's just been a crazy season. So some of you I haven't had contact with in a little while, but just know, like, we're doing everything we can to help you to go back to those basics, right? Like keep them close to you. Use the structure, use the schedule, really work on those transitions. Really, if they come home from school and they're in a mood, like it's, or they're upset, like give them ways to vent that is safe. Like if they're telling you, like, everybody at school is stupid and, all of these things, and they're using their words to tell you that, and they're frustrated, like acknowledge that frustration and ask them at that time, like, what can we do about it? Like take it seriously what they're saying so that they they can, at that level, like that's the level we want them to stay at, even if it's really negative or it drives us crazy because they're telling us, that they're being bullied when we know that they're the bully or whatever it is. But we want to keep them at that level where they can talk about it and then we can problem solve it. It's like, okay, so I get it. You're really angry and upset. What can we do about it? What's going to be the best thing that we can do in this moment? Or how can we, make this better? But also like just listening, like really acknowledge it. Yeah, I hear that, and that doesn't feel good, does it? And are you and then, before you just switch to the next thing, like, are you still angry about this? Because sometimes kids are carrying something, it's not this thing that happened that sends them over the edges, is 3 or 4 things back. And so really look at those transition times when they come home from school or and sometimes they don't want to talk. Like some kids shut down, they don't want to talk about it. And some kids do, so but I really feel like we have to really decide in our families what do we do when we're angry and upset? What do we do when we need to let some of our steam off? And what can we teach our kids that is okay to do? So really think about what's okay in your family to do when you're really angry. Like if you're really mad and you're going to throw things around, then it's going to have to be in your room or, something like that. I don't really like kids to just go and like punch a pillow or a punching bag is a little bit different, but usually that doesn't release enough for the kids. I just don't know if it doesn't have enough reactiveness. And so I want to teach them to not have to be physical with it because they're not going to always have a punching bag, and what happens if it's a person instead of a punching bag, So we want to give them some tools. And this might be I work with several families that have several family members that have anger problems. So it's like, okay, in our family, when we get angry, what can we do? And if the kids just tell you they're going to breathe or they're going to use their coping skills or they're going to go for a walk or something nice and calm that they never, ever do, like, don't buy it. Like, no, I don't think that's what you're going to do. Like, what you do when you're really angry is this. So how can I help you to not do this? Because I want to keep you from getting into trouble. And we have to kind of see it as we want to protect them. I wouldn't go into like, I want to keep you from breaking my stuff. I want to keep you from destroying things, all of that. But it's like, I just want to keep you safe. I want to keep you from getting into more trouble. And I understand that you get really, really pissed off, but what are we going to do? So that's not going to happen in the moment. You're not going to have those discussions, but we got to have those discussions in other times. So, if they're talking and they're upset and they're telling you about something and even if they're off the wall and you might even know the whole situation that happened. My son would come home, I would already know from the school what had happened, kind of like, what he did. But when he would talk to me about it, like it was all about the stuff that everybody else did to him, right? And so I wouldn't just ask him, like I was really careful in how I do it. Like sometimes I would tell him like, hey, I already heard from your teacher about what happened. Do you want to tell me your side of it? And sometimes that was good enough. Sometimes he'd be mad already and just be like, no, because you're not going to believe me. You're going to just take their side, which is kind of true because I am going to always like, I want all the adults to stand shoulder to shoulder because you've seen how crazy your kid can be. So you tell me if you believe all the stuff that they're telling you that everybody else did to them, but I want them to be able to talk about that. So I would just tell them, well, I just know what your teacher said, but I'd like to hear what you have to say. And it really started to help a lot when he could diffuse that way. And sometimes he needed to like walk around and pace while he was doing it, or like, be kind of agitated. Think about how you are when you're really agitated and you need to vent. There's not very many of us that when we get really upset, and we don't necessarily flip our lid as often as our kids do, but when we're upset enough, like what are some of the things that we do? And these can be really helpful for our kids. So we're taking it really seriously, but we got to really help them to develop that thinking and planning. So a lot of times after he would get done, like telling me what would happen and, what happened and stuff, I didn't ask a lot of more questions about it. Like, I didn't try to get him to understand, like, well, that kid said this to you because you did this first or anything like that, because I want to keep him from exploding, and I want to help him to learn better tools. So it's like, if this is his perception that this is the way it went down and that this kid did this to him, and then, he's not going to be able to actually logically understand that what he did was 10 times worse, I've got to help him to find better ways. Like, so sometimes after he would like do that, then we could talk about like, I wonder what we could have done differently. Well, nothing, because this kid, it's like always somebody else's fault, right? And that's really frustrating. But I want you to think about how much less frustrating it is to have a kid telling you that than it is to have them go down to their room and start breaking stuff, or, get mad about the next thing that, that you tell them it's chore time, and then they just explode and everybody's always picking on them, stuff. And now they're, out of control. So find those ways to help them work through that when they're in that part of their brain where they can talk about it. You're not going to get really shining like teaching moments in that, but it is present the opportunity if you can, like, I wonder how we could do that differently, or I wonder if that was the best way to respond to that. You might get some of that, and you may have to talk about that another time. Like, oh, well, thank you for telling me what happened. Do you feel like you're ready to move on, or do we need to talk about it some more? So watch that transition piece, when you feel like even if it starts off in the morning, like really, really try to watch what's going on in those moments and what you can do. So it's like, hey, you're having kind of a rough morning. Is there a way we can turn it around? So I want you to think too about like the things that we hold on to, right? Like, and how well that works for our kids. If they can't deal with something in the moment, and then we hold it over. It's like, okay, so since you're having a bad morning and you didn't get your chores done, or you didn't do this, or you didn't eat your food, or whatever it is, and then we hold that over for them, it's like, so since you had a bad morning and we did this, like, you're going to have to pay for that later. I don't think that's going to work in helping our kids that are so like, I'm, talking about like their ability to, like, that's just going to be the next thing that sets them off. So if we're going to move on from something, it's like, hey, I can tell you're having a bad morning, but let's just get this thing done so that we can move on. And see if you can like help smooth some of those transitions. The transitions have really been a key, I think, in what I'm noticing in these kids that are super explosive is, and so that time when they're kind of waiting, they get more anxious and edgy. So, kind of work on that, knowing what you're going to do next, knowing where you're going to go from here. And sometimes while they're telling you their story, you can be thinking about, okay, how am I going to move away from this, and into the next thing, and kind of watching them to see if they're ready for it. If it's something with siblings, I don't recommend trying to get to the bottom of it with both kids at that time. Like, they're just going to feed off each other, and the one that's explosive is going to be the one that gets explosive about it, whether it's because he got interrupted or because he thinks that they're telling lies, or, don't use your kids to be the ones that tell you, be the truth, one of them to be the truth bearer of what the other one's doing. It's just a setup, and I think it's going to cause more conflict, and someone probably will get hurt. Those are just a few things about like the thinking, the developing and planning and thinking about responses. And that is when they're at a certain level. I want to also make sure that we've got to really help the kids to understand that there's rules, right? And this is where I think it's like, you've got to really, really take it seriously about these kids and their destruction.
Thanks for listening to The Parenting Bridge. Do you want to learn more about building a bridge to better behaviors? Pick up a copy of Dr. Michelle Alden's new book, Parenting Emotionally Distressed Kids. Or, for more resources, you can click on the link for Healthy Foundations. If you would like to leave a comment or a question for Dr. Alden, there's a link in the notes. We'll see you next time, and remember, things can always get better.